You know, it's I had made a joke in a writers group. We were talking about all the things that just do so well and continue to the new things that do so well and the old things that continue to do so well. So I said, screw it. Next thing I'm going to write, you know, I was planning to write more PATERNUS stuff, which I do plan to do, but it'll be a few years. Screw it. I'm going to write an outsider, young outsider, nobody, farm boy type, gets into an elite magic dragon rider military school. Only he's going to ride a kraken, right? As a joke. And they're like, you know, a few days later, I get emails. We really like that idea.
Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and I'm here today with author Dyrk Ashton. He's the author of PATERNUS, the trilogy. Dyrk, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And the first thing, when I looked up your bio and looked up all of your experience to try and get some questions prepared for you, you have a lot of experience. You've done a lot of things that I'm excited to ask you about. Lots of interesting topics to talk about with you.
A whole lot of, it feels like I've lived about 4 lives at this point.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, it does. all of your bios were this big long. It looked like a TV miniseries that you've
that no one would watch.
Well, I don't know. I'd watch it. But the first thing that I wanted to ask you about is you have the coolest name is Dyrk Ashton. That's such a cool name, and it's your real name. I thought it was a pen name, but it's your real name.
Well, well, you read my bio. You know, I lived and worked in Los Angeles for almost 6 years, and I was in the Screen Actors Guild and the AFTRA, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, and everybody thought that it was a stage name because, you know, a lot of actors do. They register with SAG or AFTRA with a different name. And nope, that's my mother gave me that, and even spelled Dyrk with a Y. So it's it sounds a bit like a either a soap opera or a porn name.
Yeah, I read that too. It's hilarious, but it's such a cool name though. It's a perfect author name. So
thank you.
Perfect actor name too. So it's a great name. And in reading about your childhood, it sounds like you had a very busy childhood, lots of adventures you would get into, but you managed somehow to have excellent grades. So I'd be curious to see, how did you manage that?
I don't know. Well, you know, I studied because I kind of liked it. And I had some buddies that were pretty smart that I didn't want to look too stupid. So I'd try pretty hard. Math was tough. It wasn't until college that I realized it wasn't so bad and I could actually do it. So, but everything else was pretty easy, or not easy, but I was able to do okay.
So what was it that clicked for you in college with math that you said, I can do this? This isn't that hard.
I applied myself. I actually applied myself and had a more of an open mind, thinking, well, maybe I can do this if I just actually, you know, dive into it. And I aced algebra 1, then algebra 2, and I thought, okay, well, now I got to do calculus. I got A's in calculus 1 and calculus 2 also. Now I don't remember anything about any of it now, but math, you know, math stuff like that, you know, it's funny. It's actually hilarious. One of my old teachers is like in her 90s now, and she saw my bio, and I haven't talked to her. I didn't even know she was still alive, and she sent me a letter, and she sent me this thing. She sent me a letter, and she sent me this book bag that says, and yet another day has passed where I haven't used algebra once. Interesting. And she was my algebra teacher in grade school. So so I thought that was hilarious. And she's in her 90s. And
Wow.
I still owe her a letter back. And I hadn't heard from her in 40 years, and I had no idea she was still even around. But as far as I'm concerned, math is it's important to study things even if you aren't going to use them, because they teach you a way of thinking, right? A logical way of thinking. And I think a lot of that is missing from education these days. Everything
Hmm.
needs to be practical for this or that, or for some political purpose, or whatever it might be, either side. But as far as logical and critical thinking, I think a lot of that stuff is missing these
Hmm.
days. And mathematics is something that I think is just really, really good for the brain in the future, regardless of whether you actually apply it to anything in particular.
Yeah, it is. That's a good point. It's more about the journey so much than the destination sometimes. Just the, like
Yeah.
you said, just the thought process of solving those kind of problems, and problem solving is valuable in other parts of life too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I've always struggled with math, and in my current profession, I had to apply it towards something. So I had to learn, so I was, it was easier to learn as I got older when I could actually apply it to something that I was doing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it wasn't until I was a little older that I was able to actually apply myself to it, because I didn't see any, I was like, when will I ever use this? Well,
yeah,
that's not the right attitude. I
yeah,
learned only later, right?
yeah. You'll never get anything done with that kind of attitude. You'll never learn anything.
That's right.
So you have a BFA and a master's in filmmaking. What made you pursue filmmaking when you were in college?
I always wanted to. I always loved film and wanted to get into film. Wanted to make films. Well, not always. I mean, I originally wanted to be a herpetologist, and then I wanted to make medieval armor, and then I wanted to or be a gunsmith. Then I wanted to be a make medieval armor and medieval weapons, and then decided, screw it, I'm just going to study business, and I studied business for 2 years until finally I went to film school and got to go to film school and pursue my passion, and it was a serious passion. It was like a monkey on my back for many years. So um, I then I worked in the business in Columbus and producing commercials. Worked my way up from a PA to a grip to lighting assistant and such, any number of other things. I did some AD work, assistant directing, but ended up doing mostly production management and producing, a combination of the two mostly. And then moved out to Los Angeles and was there for 6 years. And I was writing screenplays through that time, and all that time, and was submitting them and trying to get things done. I had a lot of like really close, almost made it, the kind of things, but it mostly I made my living as an actor because I had done those little parts in films, and I have a particular look. And having worked behind the camera for so many years, I was really, really good at auditioning. Terrible actor, but I booked a real high percentage of the things that I got to audition for. So
So what's the secret to having a good audition? What are your go-to strategies?
uh, be calm, know the lines if you can, and you don't always get that much time to prepare. Sometimes none. It's a
Hmm.
cold reading where you're actually just reading from the from the screenplay, or from the lines, and then the sides, they call them, just little pieces that whatever you use to audition, and just be calm and be earnest, and do whatever they ask. A lot of it is really pretty humiliating, especially for commercials. Now, I want you to dance around this barbecue grill and look like you're really happy. And it's like, ugh. Now, how many commercials do we see like that? Every other one, right?
Yeah.
But imagine those auditions with all those guys or women, dancing around in their kitchens or out by the grill, and making complete total asses of themselves. But that's what you got to do
Hmm.
to get those kind of things. Dramatic auditions are a little more fun. They a little less kind of goofy, but you just got to show up and do your best. Now, I mean, there are things that I know, don't look straight into the camera unless you're particularly told. If you don't know, then ask, you know, never look at the camera otherwise. Keep an eye on the person who's doing the reading for you, or keep the eye line that they want you to. Um, Stay within the frame, know where the edges. If you don't know, ask where the edges of the frame are. Um,
Hmm.
so, you know, and they'll tell you tighter, tighter, you know, whatever. And don't, you know, move around too much in the frame, or go out of the frame. Um, these things are important. And those I know from just, you know, sitting in on, you know, dozens and dozens of auditions have before I went in for professional auditions. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
And you mentioned your screenplays that you were writing. It seems like there's a lot of the "I almost made it" in Hollywood or in filmmaking. Is you get really, really close, but you don't quite get there. What is that feeling like when you get really close, but it doesn't happen?
Um, well, at that point, I had been working on enough projects that I kind of knew it's really easy as an actor or as a filmmaker, to just get down on yourself like I must suck. But it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them, what they're really looking for, what their real motivations are. You know, and it's hard to tell who is serious and who is not. And that's not in the auditions side, but on the filmmaking side. They'll kill you with kindness, right?
Hmm.
Um, and don't count it a deal when they say it's a deal. Don't count it a deal when you sign the deal. Don't count it as a deal until you've cashed the check,
Hmm.
right? So it's yeah, you got to have a pretty thick skin in that business, no matter what you're working,
Yeah.
in, what area of the
So
business.
how did your time writing screenplays help you with your with writing novels? How did that transfer over, whether it's novels or short stories?
I had been writing narrative stuff before I got into screenwriting. I got into screenwriting when I was in college.
Mhm.
I took a class and just continued writing and learning and reading every book I could find. Um, and talking to other, and I had friends that were screenwriters, some who were WGA in the union, writing professionally, getting hired to write screenplays, and even they had awful times, because just because you get hired to write a screenplay by a real studio, right? A big studio, on a major project, doesn't mean they'll actually make that screenplay. They might go through 3 or 4 screenplays, and you may never get a credit at all. But you got paid to do that. To do that part of it, you get another big chunk if it gets greenlit and it goes into production. That's nice, and then you get residuals,
Mm.
which is nice. But there are multiple steps to it. But writing the screenplays taught me to think. I mean, I'm a film guy, so I think visually anyway. I think in terms of shots and space and what I can see and what I can hear. And then from the narrative side, also what I can smell, what I can feel on the air, humidity, stuff like that. Things
Mm.
that you can only communicate with images on film, right? So I brought, for the Paternus trilogy, I particularly wanted to bring that immediacy of screenwriting and of filmmaking, and uh, to the story, which is one reason that a big reason that I wrote it in present tense. Screenplays are always written in present tense because films always happen in present tense, even if it's a flashback, right, or a historical film. It's happening right now. It didn't happen before. It's happening right now. So you always write those in present tense. And plus, I had read several books that I really, really liked that were written in present tense. Like, you know, and it's not just YA stuff like Hunger Games or Red Rising. Um, Handmaid's Tale is written in present tense. Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey is written in present tense. You know, it's not just these YA, you know, um, kind of stories that are written present tense, sci-fi or fantasy, or end of the world kind of stuff. Um, um, So dystopian kind of YA literature that are written in present tense. So I have some good company,
Yeah.
even if people hate it, that's okay.
Yeah. And with anyone who has a lot of knowledge in a field, especially entertainment, I wonder, do you sometimes wish you can go back and unlearn everything you know about movies just to enjoy a movie, or do you find yourself dissecting everything and looking at it from behind the camera?
Boy, that's a good question because I actually that really did happen to me, where I could not enjoy films for a while because I saw every cut. I was thinking about every line. I could hear the clacking of the typewriter,
Yeah.
at that, when it wasn't until later, I went through most of college, at least undergrad, most of all of high school and grade school and most all of my undergrad without computers. I mean, we just didn't have them.
Mhm.
There were some labs where they were available, and they had like four, and they, you know, big clunky ass things. You typed in
Oh,
DOS. You typed in DOS. You were just using these like really really simple word processing where you had a one color screen and then one color for your text, and that was it. It was cool when you could finally change those colors, right?
yeah.
um, but that has changed the entire landscape of fictional writing for authors. It's so much faster, so much more streamlined now, and being able to zip files back and forth with editors and publishers and proofreaders and stuff like that. I mean, you can imagine what it was like when you had these enormously long, giant stacks of paper, and even the author would have made some marks in it, and then it had to go to someone else to do the same thing, and then had to come back with all those same marks in it, and what happened if it got lost? Then it had to start over again, right? Oof. Plus just research, can you imagine uh, having to do the kind of research that a lot of authors do today on, you had some books to read about medieval styles and things like that. And you'd have to go to the library or travel and talk to um, people and look and see locations. And, I don't know if that's been better or worse for literature, but things have changed a lot. So anything I could unlearn about movies, sorry to go back to the actual question, not at this point. I'm actually have for many years now been able to just watch films and enjoy them.
Mm.
I have seen thousands of movies, so it's not easy for me to be impressed anymore. I've found that I enjoy for movies, most of the time, all I see lately is, or in the past 5, 10 years, is the big blockbuster, Marvel, DC Comics, Harry Potter, fantasy stuff. I used to go see every movie I could that came out, but they just seem, even the darlings of the festivals now. I'm like, so there's a film just like that I saw made in 1957. Golden, Golden Palm Award. So it's like, yeah, it's really hard to be impressed, but I find myself really really enjoying the long form narrative format that we're getting and have been getting from television. Beginning, it kind of began with The Sopranos and then Battlestar Galactica, the reboot. I mean, that stuff just blew me away as to what could be done
Mm.
and cool stuff that they could do. And still even today, I see some shows and I'm just like, wow, like Black Sails or Arcane, that I'm just like blown away by, and that can surprise me. So that's been more of my thing of late. But I have to watch myself because I have a very addictive personality, especially when it comes to fiction. Um, and I will binge, and I just can't help myself, and it just then I don't get anything else done. So I have to be careful how many shows I allow myself to get into.
Yeah, it's trouble.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
hearing you talk about typewriters, I remember back in the good old days when a mistype now is just a delete button and you go back, but back then it was a big project to fix that
Mhm.
one letter that was wrong.
Mhm.
It
Yep.
was a whole
Yeah, you
thing.
had your white ribbon and or
Yeah,
white out.
yeah. Had to line it up just right, and it took yeah, it was a lot.
Crazy.
So you did a lot of traveling as an author, or I'm sorry, as an actor. Do you
Mhm.
have any what were your favorite places to visit or favorite experiences?
Uh, I mean, number 1 would have to have been spending 2 months in Sri Lanka,
Mm,
up in the mountains in the center of the country in a small t in a town basically called Kandy, Kandy. I was 2 months up there, and, it was amazing. That was, when I had a co-starring role for the book or the movie with the longest title ever, Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book, Mowgli and Baloo. It's a kids movie, live action kids movie, and that was an absolute blast. That was just fantastic. Um, I made a lot of good friends there, and some people I knew. I'd look across the set, and I'd be like, "I know that guy. He was a photographer on this other thing." You know, I ended up hanging out the most with some of the animal trainers and Billy Campbell, who played kind of the lead guy other than Mowgli,
mm,
um, who was Rocketeer and played the Texan in Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Coppola version, and he's done a bunch of stuff since. He's been in a zillion things, but he was really a neat guy, and we still keep in touch sometimes. So
oh, oh.
yeah.
So after your time in acting and filmmaking and going up the ladder there, you moved back to the Midwest and you started teaching.
Well, I
What
went back to get my PhD,
Right.
um, and that was, I was in my late 30s, getting my PhD, and that is all consuming. I'll tell you what. Um, but I enjoyed the hell out of it. Also, it almost killed me, as far as burnout and stuff. In fact, I decided to slow down because I did fall semester, spring semester, then did a full summer semester, and that was my mistake, because it's just so intensive. The amount of reading is insane. The amount of writing is insane. You have to be really organized, and that's where I learned better how to do research and take notes. And how to read in multiple different ways to glean information super fast, a skim, um, kind of halfway, half speed, and then a good slow, deep read. And then where to find, how to search, particular ways to search for information, things like that. And of course, I put a lot of that to work, and I enjoy that. I used a lot of that in work in writing Paternus.
Hmm. How did you apply that with your writing with Paternus? Is there certain techniques you would use or certain things you
Uh,
would
well,
particularly?
I can't. That would be like a whole episode, but
Okay.
um, it's just learning where to look and how to look.
Mm,
What kinds of how to narrow down your keywords. I would always any source where I found something interesting. A lot of times, I would, believe it or not, start with Wikipedia because it's the top thing that comes up. Um, but then I would copy paste those notes in or handwrite what was in or type in what was interesting. I have hundreds of pages of notes for that series, way more than I ever needed,
okay.
and a whole lot of it just never made it in the book. But a lot of it went into the world building in the background. Um, and but then I would look at the sources that they had, and if they didn't have any sources, I would search again, and I would try to find at least three other sources that said the same thing. And it wasn't just copied and pasted from this source to that source. And you see a lot of that, especially with mythology. Um, this is the same thing that Wikipedia said, that this said, that this said, same wording. They just copied and pasted this stuff in there. So I would look, and if I couldn't find that, then I would either make something up on my own, or just not use it. Right.
Yeah, just cut it out.
Yeah.
And so, during your time teaching, what did you learn about yourself during that time?
Um, that I actually have no problem talking in front of people.
Hmm.
Um, Groups of people that I don't know, because you're doing it every day. In the beginning of every semester, it's a whole bunch of new people that most of them you just don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that gave me a lot more confidence in myself, and just keeping that kind of schedule was really good for me, I think. So yeah, those two things.
And that's when you started writing Paternus. Is when you after you spent some time teaching online, and then you also were teaching in the classroom. When you started writing the book, what was the reaction from people closest to you that you were writing this book and you were going to follow through with it?
Well, I found after I left my tenure track job to teach only online, which I still do. That's my day job. I've been doing that for 12 years now. And I teach for 3 different schools as an adjunct. It's just freelance online teaching is what I do. I also build courses and act as an SME, a subject matter expert,
Wow.
where for others that are building film studies or film production courses. And I build courses from scratch, so I make some money doing all those things. But mostly it's just the teaching. But once I left and I was able to actually read fantasy books again, which I had not been able to do for 10 years, 5, 10 years, I had always wanted to write one. I even tried to write one in high school, handwritten, of course. It was more superhero sci-fi, but it I had always had these crazy ideas floating around, and they all became Paternus, kind of got mashed together. Uh, when I first started, most people just didn't even know I was doing it, except for my close family members. And I started telling friends, and then they wanted to read, and then they were reading chapters as I went. But I was messing around with it, just having fun. I had no intention of really submitting it or anything. And it really wasn't until after the first book was done, which took me 4 years to write.
Mhm.
I say between 3.5 and 4.5, but it really took me probably 4 years to write. And started, messing around thinking about, I'd had agents before, and did I want to submit it or did I want to self-publish? And at that point, self-publishing in 2015, when I was thinking about doing this, it was still, you would be blackballed from the traditional publishing world, basically, if you did that forever. Now that changed. There are still some of those feelings, but a lot of that has changed very significantly and swiftly since then. So I talked to some other friends who were represented, who were authors, and they read the book and they're like, don't bother, just self-publish it, because they'll want you to change all this stuff, and we love it the way it is. And if this is, the book that you want to write, then just get some good, here are some ideas, and get some good proofreaders, and, get it out there, see what happens. So that's what I decided to do. And I'm very happy that I did. I have nothing really against traditional publishing, but I would have to have a pretty good deal to do one. I'm actually writing a book for a small publisher now, a new trilogy. That's what I'm doing now.
Mm.
And I never thought I would do that, but it was a great deal. And it's working with people that I really, really like. So I'm actually on contract right now, which is, but I'm really happy with it. So.
How is it being on contract now versus self-publishing before? Is it a big difference? Does your approach change now versus before?
It doesn't, it doesn't really. Now it's being co-written with David Estes, who wrote the Fate Mark series and now has the King Mark King Kingfall
Oh, okay.
is doing, and he's just a really awesome guy, and I had already known him for a few years, and Bryce O'Connor has Wraithmark Creative, and they came to me thinking we really would like to do this thing, because I had thrown out this goofy ass idea for something I would do just kind of as a joke, but that's what I'm doing, and it's really fun. I mean, the tentative title, I don't know if you've heard what I'm working on. The tentative title is Kraken Rider Z. It's I had made a joke in a writer's group. We were talking about all the things that just do so well and continue to, the new things that do so well, and the old things that continue to do so well. So I said, screw it. Next thing I'm going to write, I was planning to write more PATERNUS stuff, which I do plan to do, but it'll be a few years. Screw it. I'm going to write an outsider, young outsider, nobody, farm boy type, gets into an elite magic dragon rider military school. Only he's going to ride a Kraken, right? As a joke. And they're like, a few days later, I get emails. We really like that idea. Would you be interested in maybe? We know you probably wouldn't, but then I was talking to him on we had a Zoom call, and it just, it's been awesome ever since. That's been a year ago. So.
Oh, wow. What was your reaction when they told you we want to move forward with this? What was your reaction to that?
I thought it was hilarious, But I started thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, I could write this. And I'm just making it super fast, super fun. Not a lot of blood or cursing, just more kind of, but it's also a progression fantasy. I left that part out, right? Epic progression fantasy. Throw that into the kitchen sink, right? So that's in there too. So all those things, plus it's epic progression fantasy. So it's got your magic school, it's got your dragon riders, it's got your military school, it's got your outcast made good, and it's got your progression fantasy, and it's got your epic fantasy. So just all the things that always do well, right? Freaking magic schools and military schools and fantasy military schools and dragon riders. I mean, that shit just sells all the time. So why not just jam it all together? So that's what I'm doing. But it's really been a blast, an absolute blast to write.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. Looking forward to reading that one.
Thank you.
And we did have a couple of questions from Twitter while we're on the topic of Jack Cropper, sorry, Jack, said he loves the PATERNUS series. The depth and scale of characters was very impressive. He would be interested to know how you came up with the inspiration for dropping these characters into a modern day world.
I had always been, thanks for the question. I always had loved mythology, right? And I have for a long time played with the idea of kind of a unified field theory for mythology. Meaning I have read so many from all over, and there are just like striking similarities in types of characters, archetypes, but also side characters. It's like this character from, Hindu mythology, and this character from Native American mythology, and this character from African mythology are very, very similar, right? Even with origins and story arc. And I was like, okay, what if a bunch of them were they all come from a basic source, one source. And these are the same characters. They're just these ancient, powerful beings who have traveled. And even if they themselves have not traveled over the history of civilization, stories about them have traveled, right? So there are multiple layers of how stories get told and changed as they go. So that was my inspiration. to bring together all these disparate characters and disparate kinds, what seem like disparate characters and mythologies, and bring them all together. So
Hmm. And Fantasy Book Critic has quite a few questions for us. The first one is,
is it me here?
it is, yeah, yeah,
I love me here.
yeah, he's great.
Me here
Uh,
is awesome.
yeah. The first one was, how did you make the world mythologies fit so precisely within your world?
I first had to come up with what that unified field theory was, right? And that was not that easy. And I probably went back and forth taking notes and trying different ideas before I started writing for several months. And I was looking at mythologies and originary creators, creator gods, right? First man kind of myths, which many mythologies have, and you know how people were created in various and sundry ways. You know, some are created out of mud, some are created out of a piece of a god's body or a dead god's body that's been killed. Um, and in a surprising number of them, some being came down or came up or came in or came through and mated with an animal of some sort,
Hmm.
right? To create, yeah, certain peoples, you know, and those myths are pretty widespread. Now, of course, I had to be careful a little bit about how that happened, right? So what I did was I decided to play with that one. Only this being had no shape or form until it began to have feelings for something, right? And this is long before there were human beings, human morality. This being doesn't know where he came from or who he is or what he is, right? So he was able to, you know, just his presence and energy in the oceans basically spawned life, right? So I went with that. So then all of these other gods are his children, right?
Hmm.
And the closer they are, if they're his direct child, the older and more powerful they are. And those are the firstborn, then they're second, third, and fourth. And they've all had multiple names throughout history, right? And he had names throughout history from just about every religion. So, you know, he would have been the original Odin, right? He would have been, um, he was any number of other creator gods, though not God himself, not creator of the universe. He knows that he isn't the creator of the universe, or is pretty sure. So what and who that is left more to the imagination. It's hinted at later on in book 3, what that might be. But just having an originary being on an originary Earth, was how I did it, and those characters just basically became um, the gods of various cultures around the world.
Hmm.
Around the world.
The next one was almost what you're just speaking about is, what are some of your favorite mythological stories from around the world?
Oh boy, you know that's a real tough one because I love them all. Of course, I began with Greek and Norse, like everybody does as a kid, and uh, and uh, and moved out from there to Irish, and then got into Hindu, which was like mind blowing compared to even the crazy stories of Roman and Greek myth. And then Mesoamerican, Native American, African mythologies, the Vodun, and you know, there are so many different ones. That's just one type of mythology because Africa is a very, very diverse country, as is South America, Central America, and even North America. It's amazing how many different I hate to say tribes, but how many different, groups of Native Americans had such wildly different mythologies, and then going up into, the northern areas. And it was just, there are stories out of all of them that I love. I still have an outrageous fondness for, some of the Norse mythologies. And, of course, when I was pretty young, I read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I just loved some of that stuff. And meanwhile, I was also reading, and that's kind of what got me into fantasy reading, which I started also very, very young, because those to me felt like modern day mythologies, right? And I was a huge, I mean, I hate to say it, but well, okay, I don't hate to say it, but Arthurian stuff is just, I just love it. I just love that stuff. All those stories. So yeah, I can't say there's a favorite. No.
Yeah, there's a lot
Yeah,
to choose from.
there's so many that I love.
Here's another one. So reimagine a particular mythology story, or let's see. Um, I'm sorry. Would you ever write a mythological based fantasy or reimagine a particular mythological story as a secondary fantasy epic?
Maybe. I might. I'm a really slow writer is the problem, and I'm not a spring chicken. I'll be 60 this year. So I'm good for a book a year every 2 years. So I've got these 3 books that I'm writing. The first book for Rafe Markton, the Kraken Rider Z series, will come out the end of this year, hopefully, and then each year after that. And then I've got some short books that I want to write, shorter books, 4 to 6 of them, more classic urban fantasy, detective, demon hunter kind of stuff, more Jim Butcher-esque kinds of things, or Kevin Hearn. But instead of kind of the wizard with a franchise type, it's going to be more like, a bookstore or a tea room or, a detective agency. It's going to be more a Ronin type wandering do-gooder, but with a dark side. In the Paternus world that takes place about 20 years before the trilogy. And then I want to write another trilogy that takes place 15 to 17 years after the Paternus trilogy. So, I mean, you're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, you're talking 10, 12 years into the future if I'm still writing at that time, right? So Lord knows what I might write, but I still want to do those things very much. Now, if something else comes up or somebody offers me a big bunch of money to do something, I might do that. So we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah. It's you never know, things priorities change. So
yeah.
So the next question that Mihir had was, what's your favorite role and why is it Kareech from Jungle Book 2?
That was so much fun. That was a blast. And partially because it was the largest role, right? That was just so much fun to work on, and it was a really fun character, and came pretty naturally to me to do. And I really like snakes, so walking around with a heavy ass python was not so bad. The thing weighed 65 pounds. It's like wow. 10 and a half feet long. And so I had to, wander around with a 65-pound weight on me. Most people don't think about that, but that thing was heavy. Yeah. And I even had to climb a tree with it at one point. Luckily, I was in fairly good shape at that time because it was in the mid 90s. But it's funny, of the small roles, the other one would have to be, the truck zombie in Night of the Living Dead. That was such a fun, that was one day. I went over earlier a day to meet with Tom Savini and my buddy Nick Mastandria, who's assistant director, and get a fitting with Everett Burrell and John Vulich, who are the young upcoming special effects guys. Met with them for one day to get a head cast. Once I picked the zombie, because Tom was like, pick a zombie, any zombie. I've seen your short films. Nikki showed me to you. I loved them all. And of course, he doesn't talk like that, but it feels like he does. But he does talk with a lot of energy and very quickly, maybe more so then than now. So we went through them. I picked one. I went over to their studio. They put all the goop on my head, and I had to breathe out of straws, and a little tube, and get the head cast for the stunt, and then went home. I stayed at the hotel after I got in a car wreck, and then went home and came back. I don't know, maybe a month or two later. I can't remember. Maybe not even that long, and just shot for, I think, one day, maybe two. I might have been on set for two. I can't remember. We're talking about 1989, right? And that was just a lot of fun because a lot of my friends were there and people that I knew. And then I ended up hanging out with and becoming friends with a little bit. I didn't see him a lot, but Everett Burrell, who's like now he's the head of special effects and an associate producer or a producer, I believe, with his own production deal with Netflix. He does Umbrella Academy. So he's big time. I'm actually going to see him. I'm going for the first time ever. I'm going to do one of the Night of the Living Dead conferences that's taking place this summer in Pittsburgh in June, I believe. And Everett's going to come out and show a bunch of old clips and photographs, and I'm going to dig out a bunch of old photos I have. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Oh wow, that sounds great. That sounds like a really fun trip down memory lane there.
It should be a blast. Yeah.
And his last question was, I think you already answered it, but how did you come up with the title Kraken Rider Z? But I think we talked.
It was a total joke, and I did that, and I put that joke in there because people were talking about progression fantasy, Dragon Rider books, Farm Boy, epic fantasy, progression fantasy, magic schools, military schools, all these things. So I put all this stuff together, and I said, except because it's me, my main character is going to ride a Kraken, and I'm going to call it Kraken Rider Z. And it was just a joke, right? And that's I mean, it just came out of my head because I was like, I'll make my main character's name Z, and he'll be a Kraken Rider. So I don't know. Yeah, it wasn't one of those things that I thought about. I was just being a dumbass, as usual.
So in addition to all these other things you have going on, you also have the podcast, host of Wizards, Warriors, and Words.
Mm-hmm.
What has that experience been like to have that podcast?
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work too. I mean, we were supposed to have a recording this morning, but it's Jed who really kind of pulled it all together. Hey, you guys want to try this? We do one or two and see how they worked out. And I didn't really know him that well. Jed Hearn, I know Mike Fletcher, and I know Rob Hayes. I've met them both. Spent days at a couple different cons with Rob Hayes in England and in Ireland, but we just decided we'd try it. But it's difficult because you have to come up. We don't have any problem really coming up with topics because we'll talk about any goofy shit. And we're just a bunch of goofballs anyway. Why anybody really watches us, I have no idea. But it's a lot of fun. I love doing it, but it is hard to carve out that time, especially because Jed is in Australia.
Oh yeah.
Mike and I are on Eastern Standard Time in the U.S. in North America. He's up near Toronto, and I'm down in Ohio. So at least we're on the same time zone. But then Rob is in England, so it's really tough to to do those. Even if it's really early in the morning for us, it's really late at night for Jed. And if we do something that's better for Jed and okay for me and Rob, like um, even if Jed does 6 a.m. his time, right? And that's freaking early.
Yeah.
It's like 5 o'clock for me and Mike, and that's fine, except for, that's kind of dinner and family time, but it's usually okay. But that's 10 o'clock at night for Rob. So it just gets weird. And if it's 8 o'clock in the morning for us, it's like 11 o'clock in the morning at night, or 10, yeah, 8, 9 o'clock at night already for Jed. And we've been doing Saturdays. So we were doing Saturdays like that. So his Saturday night, every Saturday night was blown. Now, for old farts like me and Mike, it's no big deal because, it's not like, we're going out or doing anything. But Jed's like 14. He's got things he wants to do. Hey, he's not that young. He might be 15 or 16, but
Yeah.
he's got things he wants to do on a Saturday night. And so
It is really tough getting time zones figured out. Sometimes it can
yeah,
get really complicated.
yeah.
So I
But
do have
it's been a blast. I really love doing it. I've learned a lot doing it. Getting our guests in is fun, and just being able to chat with those guys is always a blast.
when you find a group of people you can just shoot the shit with, and just it can be about anything. That's special, and it's not
Yeah,
always it doesn't always
yeah,
click like that. So it's fun to have
yeah.
that kind
It's
of connection.
awesome.
Yeah. So before I let you go, I just have a couple more questions for you to
Okay.
finish up with. The first one is, do you have any favorite family recipes?
I don't cook.
Okay.
I have favorite recipes that my mother cooks.
That'll do. Yeah.
She makes a meatloaf that is to die for, that I've never had its equal.
Hmm.
And she makes that from her mother's recipe that was her mother's recipe. So, um, and my mom is 80 and her mother was 41 when she was born.
Hmm.
So we're talking going way back with this recipe. So it's not like, uh, it's not like, uh, you know, really close. It's going way back. That one is probably my favorite.
Hmm. So, speaking of zombies, if the zombie apocalypse happened today, what would be your weapon of choice?
Um, I'd have to have two.
Okay.
I have to have um I'd have to have a good 45 caliber pistol. Um, and I'd have to have something to hit them in the head with, you know. Um, like either an axe or
Hmm.
something I could stab. A spear would be fantastic, a good old fashioned spear that I could just poke them in the head with, as long as it was good and sharp and I could get through the skull easily.
Yeah.
But those would be my weapons of choice. Now, of course, I'd rather have the use the pistol, but you can run out of ammo pretty quickly, so you gotta resort to something else.
Yeah. Got to be careful with that.
Yeah.
The next thing is, what was your first job?
Um, that's a good question because I did a lot of like really little small things, but stuff that I was hired by other people to
Hmm.
do. Um, I would go in once a week and clean up the local veterinary clinic, clean out the cages. Now they did that during the week, but I would do like the real scrub and bleach and strip and wax the floors and get all the hair up and do that once a week. I got hired to do that. That was probably the first regular job that I had. I did that for maybe a year or 2 years. I can't really remember. But I was in high school.
Mm.
I did babysitting when I was in high school, on a daily basis over the summer because both parents worked. So I would go and watch this kid, um, every day, which was basically just reading and, you know, playing with the kid and making sure he ate. But I think he was in second grade, something like that, and I was a sophomore.
Yeah.
And I also would do odd jobs, paid to do odd jobs for a friend of mine's dad who had a warehouse, and we'd paint the walls or clean up the floor, move a bunch of barrels around, or any number of things on occasion. So
Lots of life lessons to be learned from jobs like that. Those little odd jobs. You learn a lot of techniques and ways to problem solve, and have to get creative sometimes to get things done.
right, right. And you have to, well, I also learned I can't just be a kid that doesn't want to have to work if I want money. And if you're going to work, you might as well do a decent job and spend the time doing it and not hate it, you know,
Yeah,
which is hard, which is, you know, it's a hard lesson to learn as a kid. So
it definitely is. Yeah. And something I like to ask all of my guests is, if the roles were reversed and you were in my position, was there a question that you would have asked that I did not ask?
that asked me, um, that's a really good question. So I would ask that question.
Okay.
I would ask the question that you just asked.
Fair enough. Okay. I tried
No,
to.
I would ask, you know, right now I would ask, what is that hat you're wearing?
What is that hat you're wearing?
This is, you know, you recognize that?
Is that Firefly?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. This is a Ian Lino original design. I have a
Oh,
bunch of Ian's stuff. I love it. Ian is the artist, childhood friend of Josiah Bancroft,
oh, wow.
who wrote the Tower of the Books of Babel, 4 books, which are some of my favorite books ever. And then I met Ian at Dragon Con some years ago, and I've seen him every year there since that I've been able to go. There was the one year with COVID we couldn't go, but I went last year, and I get a lot of his stuff. He did the title or the cover design for all the Books of Babel. So
Hmm.
yeah, super talented guy, and he's got a lot of neat stuff. So
Oh, awesome. It's
yeah,
such a tragedy the
and
way
I'm a
that.
big Firefly Firefly fan. Say that 10 times.
So depressing the way that show ended. It's really sad.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
such a bummer. But
At
things.
least we have Serenity, the
Yeah,
movie,
yeah, it was good.
which I really enjoy.
Yeah, it was fun. It was great when the movie came out because it was everyone was waiting for it, and then was getting made, and it was a big treat for us at the time. So,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I have a
so
lot of Firefly t-shirts. Actually, I think the image that I have for Twitter
hmm,
is me sitting in the Game of Thrones throne. And that's actually one of the real ones used in the shoot. That was
okay.
at Worldcon. And there was nobody around, so I just like sat in it and asked somebody to take a picture. And I was wearing a Firefly shirt.
When in Rome, right? You can't pass that opportunity up.
Exactly.
Yeah. Who's not going to sit on that throne if they can?
Exactly.
Let's just say you did it. Yeah. So I know you. I want to let you go within the time, but if people want to connect with you, where's the best place to find you and just say hello or tell you how great your books are?
Uh, everybody do that. Um, uh, or whatever you want to tell me. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as Dyrk. I'm just Dyrk Ashton on Facebook. But I also, that's my personal, but I follow everybody who requests it, as long as they're cool, or well, as long as they're not dicks.
Yeah.
And then I also have Paternus Books Media page on Facebook, and my website where you can contact me and see what's up. I don't do much with the website, but somebody is working on that right now. They're going to set it up. They're going to get a store set up for me, so that'll be really cool, and I'll let everybody know. But that's just paternusbooks.com. Paternusbooks, all one word.com. So you can find me there as well. And I am on, I do get messages on Goodreads as well. So.
Great. And I'll put all those links in the description on YouTube or the podcast. And
Okay. Did I send those to you yet?
no, I do have them all up though. I
Oh,
have
okay,
them.
cool. Thank you.
Yeah. And you do have a newsletter on your website, right? Because I signed up for it.
Yes, you can sign up for a newsletter, and I don't send it out very often, so it's usually fairly important stuff, deals that I know are going on, or things that are going on with me and my Kickstarter or Kickstarters. I've been in the madness of the final mailing of the last Kickstarter stuff for War of Gods Book 3 and the slipcases, which look just like this. These are the special edition hardbacks that I did with the Kickstarter.
So nice.
And this is the slipcase, and I'm just sending out the final ones of these. Started last week on Monday. I'm still packing today. When I'm done here, I'll be back down in the basement packing. But there will be a real limited number. I'm almost out. These are numbered editions, but I'll have 20 or 25 maybe, hopefully, as long as the bunch don't get lost in shipping all over the world, that will be available on the store once I finally get that up. So yeah, it's been busy.
It looks really great. Really, really
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So thanks again. I know you're busy, so I appreciate you taking the time to come and answer a few silly questions and have a few
Thank
laughs.
you for having me. I always enjoy it. This has been great.
Cool. Thanks again, and I'll have all the links down below for everyone to find you.
Thanks.
Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.